I march forward in my head, my friends, and then I say something. Marching forward, it's like being at the gym, and all of a sudden you just feel like nothing can stop you, actually. Although I could use a little more sleep. Welcome back, Artist Journal, July 18th, 2025. Broadcasting from the non-space of the mind, looking at those lines of light, those invisible lines of light in my head as I look at the sun rays here. A little bit of sun. I better record quickly. Berlin, I was texting a friend, it's like I might have to come back to Greece. I might have to go back to Greece because I feel like my July is being stolen, but there is sun. So let us pray to the pastoral gods of lore for good weather. Anyways, speaking of good weather, funny how that works. Element Lee. You don't see a ton of Element Lee on X. Unfortunately, from just a purely artistic point of view, you will find Element Lee on Threads, and it is a he. I checked it out, actually, on his website. I was not sure. So, one of the most interesting, and I would argue, and maybe it's by, a function of not being much on X, unfortunately, but one of the more underrated artists in the scene in terms of what you look at when you look at what Element Lee is doing from a purely, conceptual point of view in terms of execution. And you won't see it from this work on its own, but I'll take you through some of it. And I've been talking about Element Lee. I've actually had Element Lee's work on the show for another one for years. And it keeps getting more interesting. And again, I would argue one of the most interesting artists, from my humble opinion here, in the entire, what I loosely call the second generation of digital art here, for lack of better term, works for me. But basically, I would say, like, a real standout. So let's see. Now that you've heard my take, time to make your own. So clearly, this is the sky. This is clouds, and we get some of the colors that we're familiar with. And of course, Element Lee uses, like myself, I don't always do this, but I do it quite a bit, uses the phone as the main compositional tool, which I've been doing actually since 2015 actually, November 2015, when the iPhone 6S came out. Anyways, so here, nice colors. So here you just basically see what I would call just a cool, kind of nature composition, a sky with clouds done with one would assume, as usual, with a phone. You see the resolution here, which I would guess this is about 256. I think we're going to see here in a second. I quite like this stuff going on here. Also over here, you need to figure out that change the size and color of your cursor thing, but stuff like this, I assume this is hand done. It looks hand done, which is maybe an important point. This isn't fill tool, so to speak. And over here, and so using basically, for the most part, looking like a 1 pixel by 1 pixel brush, but letting, the little parts bleed in like this, a square brush, we might say. And so kind of a wonderful piece. As I always say with pixel art, it goes wonderfully well with nature. I think it's that, I think I called it an epic contrast at one point, that natural contrast, that hard contrast between nature's, organic curves, and then you have the pure digital, abstract, geometric digital. And then you get this epic contrast. It's kind of the contrast of digital and real life. The organic, almost as we were saying, is this a modern garden airplane traps? A bridge too far, perhaps. But as we were saying, with Max Ernst's garden airplane traps, the organic and the inorganic, and this kind of almost hostile relationship, one could argue, maybe in our case that we're discussing, we would just say a very strong contrast, almost a cosmic contrast, which I believe I have said in the past. So another just final point, that doesn't look like white, does it? That looks like some sort of gray blue white. Interestingly, just a nice little detail there. And even down here, just kind of interesting. So I brought up quite a few works here. I love this. Artistic research. So of course this is on Instagram. Let me do this. Pixel art. So pixel art, digital art, artwork, artistic research, which is actually a pretty big clue into what Elemently is doing, and I would argue a clue into what makes it interesting and inherently, from an artistic perspective, what is I would say necessary. I was going to say valuable, but that has too many market connotations. That makes it necessary. There is new ground that is being covered, and we're kind of back to our aesthetic laboratory from last episode. And so here, and again, traveling through the mediums, having a lot of the big, I would argue, engaging in a lot of the big discussions that I would argue inform making visual arts in 2025. What is pixel art? And here we have a very, interesting take on pixel art, let's say. And then also traveling through the mediums, which I'd argue is the most interesting conversation in the visual arts since Warhol. I would argue more or less started it. I'm sure there are antecedents. Maybe you could even say Baldessari a little bit. But Warhol, as I've explained previously in the later work, very much, photographing the drawing, blowing it up, screen printing, right? And then you're getting, that screen print of that graphite texture sure looks beautiful, doesn't it? Right? And so that is what I'm talking about in practical terms when I talk about traveling through the mediums. And I believe I brought this up, but let's just bring it up right here. Internet seems to be working nicely here. This is brilliant too, and I'd argue actually a bit of there's something really great about this, actually, on a couple of levels. I mean, it does, the first, I am back to Warhol here. The first thing I think of was a great, excellent exhibition in Rome, right on the other side of the hill where the Capitoline Museum is. There's like a little kind of contemporary art space museum, and they had an amazing Warhol show, and I'll never forget it, where he had drawn a truck, and then it was on a piece of paper. It was just like a pencil drawing, and he needed more space. So just like, as you can see here, perhaps, he added another piece of paper. And so when I see this, I just think of Warhol. But there's other things going on here too, and who knows if Elemently even saw, that. What's interesting about this, is a couple of things. First of all, it's not worrying about using some super duper paper. And there's a time and a place to use super duper paper. But what's kind of cool about this is this looks like it could have almost been printed out at home on an 8.5 by 11. You might say this part right here is extra interesting because you don't even need this part. That has somehow been kind of like inserted in the middle, unless you're thinking about your composition and going, well, actually, it needs a bit more space, doesn't it? So that's probably what happened here. And look at this. And so, Elemently showing right here, as well as showing the printing that's going off. You think of Wade Guyton. A lot of very what is printing, and, how do we get printing working into our process? So kind of interesting, right? Because I do like to call, digital art somewhat of a parallel tradition. It is so alien, it is so different. But when you go back to the physical and you start using the phone, pixel art, and then you start playing with these very interesting conversations of traveling through the mediums, of printing, inkjet that's getting, there's mistakes. Hello, Wade Guyton. Then all of a sudden it's like, hey, the market can do what it wants with Elemently. In a sense, Elemently doesn't need to care less. Money's great, but I'll just keep having my little conversation over here until you guys figure it out, is basically what Elemently can say to themselves, I would argue. And so I'll just keep doing my thing. You know, so pretty cool. You know, all to say. Look at this. And so if you don't know anything about Element Lee's work, or if you even hadn't seen the track record, you might go, well, not sure what to think of this. But when you see the track record, you start going, oh, what's going on here? More unpredictability, more sparking of questions and interest. What's going on here? What's with this color? Is that a white or is that an off-white? Right? So, very interesting artist. I'm curious how many followers. 1,164 followers. So I'd say for the most part, you know, not a hugely discovered artist. But when you consider the, at least from my perspective, the significance of what they're doing, you know, you might say a pretty underrated artist from my perspective. And so you can form your own opinion here. Look at this. So cool coloring, 2 colors here. This stuff, and I don't know, Bitcoin's not everybody's cup of tea. It's getting pretty expensive to mint on it, but what's cool is Element Lee's work, in my humble estimation, is crying out for ordinals and to put on Bitcoin. That is like, it is begging to be put on, because again, and then look at this, right? And back to the paper. So Element Lee completely aware. It's not like this is some accident of someone who doesn't know what they're doing. Element Lee completely aware, as we saw in that close-up of the paper. You know, and again, so here we go again. So, and it creates a preciousness too. In a sense, you know what's interesting about this situation here? Is imagine this is done on like fancy paper. Again, there's a time and a place. Sometimes I use fancy paper. There is a time and a place, but imagine this is done on fancy paper and it's one big sheet and it's done all perfectly. Would it have the same poetic impact? And the answer, my friends, at least I would say, is just actually unambiguously no. It would not have the same poetic impact. You would lose all of this commentary on the medium. As you see here, it's like, oh, you know what? Actually, I'm not going to worry about this perfectly lining up. I'm just going to put it together, kind of make it work. And actually, I'm going to kind of comment on this. I'm not going to worry about making it look perfect. So it's the imperfectness, the accidents, and almost at the end of the day, the randomness that is being incorporated into this kind of perfect medium, so to speak, this geometric mathematical where everything is perfect, you know, pixel art. And what Element Lee is doing is adding randomness into that equation, I would argue. And interestingly as well, it's like those comics from the 1940s and 50s, the golden age of comics, as well as the 60s to a certain degree, but more so the 40s and 50s, when they're printed on cheap paper. It gives the comics, it makes them more precious. And just like in comics in the late 90s, when they became obsessed with putting on good paper so they could jack up the price, double the price really, and then the paper doesn't even look as good, I would argue. All these assumptions, right? Instead of putting, like, the preciousness is in the cheapness. It creates this delicateness, and then also, and part of the thing that you're trying to do when you're making physical artwork, I would argue, you're trying to make a precious object. You're trying to make something feel you're trying to almost infuse it with a kind of preciousness, with value to a certain degree. You don't want people to get it and feel like, oh, this is like a cheap, knockoff, thing. You want it to like, this is incredible, precious, be careful, put it under glass under perfect conditions. So let's continue here. Another interesting experiment, CMYK. So the printing ink colors, and then here, almost punning on a brushstroke, right? One could argue, perhaps. And so, right, so probably did it with the, finger on the phone, and then probably added, and then drew in what would, be, in a sense, brush marks. Like would the equivalent of, oh, how would I make it look like a brush? And look at all of the things that's going on in this apparently simple image. CMYK, you have printing. you have pixel art, and you have, what looks like probably a brush. All in this simple composition, right? So Element Lee, Vienna-based Chinese digital artist, he uses mobile phones as the main tool to create digital drawings, forming an interconnected, and listen to this, and growing quote-unquote drawing network under multiple themes. The work pursues independent aesthetics and works in a way of artistic research. So did a BA, China Central Academy of Fine Arts, and now in Vienna, studying digital arts at the University of Applied Arts. So did a show actually a year ago on expanded art, pixel cartography. Cool title. And look at all these works. Sold out. So did a great show here. As you can see, we're going to look at some more. There is one available on OpenSea. I brought it up just for fun to give because there's so many works we can look at here. But incredibly interesting and, dare I say, underrated artist. Here's the work on OpenSea, 0.12. Let's see. And look at this, this diagonal, and then here. So it's just incredibly interesting and beautiful work. A lot of color in this series, isn't there? So this is on Foundation, where actually other works are available. Also has works on Tezos, which I don't think I actually brought up, ironically. Although, full transparency, I have to buy my work before the show these days. I did pick up 2 or 3, but there are a ton available, should people be interested. But yeah, okay, so again, this is on ETH, 0.08 ETH here. So, not super cheap, but not crazy expensive either. Affordable if you're already in ETH. So, as you see here, an interesting consistency here in these element constructions. Experimental pixel art as the medium for observing and thinking about all things. So, fascinating artist. Here's another work. This was posted on Threads. What is this? This is the drawing network. The drawing network approach harnesses the freely iterative nature of digital drawing, allowing repeated depictions of a single theme. Something we've seen and commented on with Element Lee in the past. In a sense, why dark background, why light background? In a sense, dark mode and light mode. Something I've commented on in the past in work, and it's a very interesting discussion. I think I've done dark mode remixes, and here you see a similar idea. You see this thing, but with a black background. But here, brilliantly, Element Lee changes the size, puts it underneath, puts it to the left aligns it. I mean, these are all poetic decisions. It looks obvious when you look at it. That's why I call, graphic design the thankless profession. Because when it's finished, people go, yeah, of course, this looks like really nice art. But they don't understand, oftentimes, unless you've actually done the process, all of the philosophy and the, jumping over the hoops and of your own rationality, avoiding your own rationality, and how difficult that is to get here. And to go, and you know what, I'm going to put that one here. Even though, it doesn't make sense, but I'm making it make sense. I'm creating meaning here. So the drawing network experiment. So let's continue here. The images can be continuously modified, rearranged, interconnected, and it grows, enabling a multidimensional representation, spatial understanding, and long-term articulation of the subject. So this is fascinating, right? I mean, we're back to juxtaposition. To a certain degree, we're back to surrealism, right? The wedding of two opposite realities in a new context. In a sense, l'autre amant's, umbrella and a sewing machine on an operating table. To a certain degree, we're playing along similar principles here. William Burroughs' cut-up method, the third mind, Brian Geisen and William Burroughs. Ballard's experiments with this. So we're playing with juxtaposition here where, Element Lee doesn't need to know all of the meanings that are going to happen here. Element Lee can just put them together and just go, that kind of makes some interesting sparks of meaning. Some interesting sparks of meaning. these sparks of significance, right? Let's continue. So we have seen this, and we saw this brilliance here. Now we can appreciate this brilliance here. So that is element Li actually on Tezos. I didn't even bring that up. Let's continue. And love where this show is going. I have no idea where this show is going. Experiments from the Aesthetic Laboratory. Love that title. Nicholas Dietrich, great show, Adrian. Thanks for the mention. And thanks for the mention. Haiti Rockettes are so hard to catch on primary. It's so true, but I like the challenge. It's great to see so many new pieces from him. I totally agree. It seemed like he took a little bit of a hiatus. So, and again, he's kind of like the Myth, who we're going to see a brilliant artwork by. He's kind of like the Myth, one of these original greats. They call them original gangsters. Let's call OG original greats on Tezos. So it's just great to see him back. Same with Myth. I mean, there's a point where we didn't see Myth for a few months. And again, it's great to see these people, making lots of work. Prolific. DJ Kiro, thanks for showing DU VFX app. Excited to see what people come up with. So I didn't mention it last episode, but it will be it's in the description here. I actually had to fix the link yesterday. So here is where it is. So I'm going to put it in today's show as well. I'm going to put this. So if you want to click on the link here, that'll take you to the app, or you just put DU VFX in the App Store if you have an iPhone. And so I think someone said when desktop. And we had Little Cakes. Maybe I can bring up, I'll see if I can bring up Little Cakes' comment. She loved it, by the way. So thank you, Kiro, for sponsoring the show. And as someone said, when I grow up, I want to have a sponsor like this, Detroit Underground. Totally. Excited to see what people come up with. Indeed. So here is the hashtag, DUVFX. You got to love the sponsorships where you're excited to talk about it, right? Crash Stop. I would say Haiti Rockette's work is more reminiscent of the Jody Collective's My Desktop than Warhol. But I'm not sure if I know the Jody Collective's My Desktop series, but I can see how you make the connection to Warhol, but also agree the fun of reusing desktop icons and language in work is very powerful, because it reminds us both of our younger selves first and innocent exploration of Windows 95 and other GUIs, or graphic user interfaces, when there were possibilities rather than restrictions. And again, I just feel like, Haiti Rockette, as I like to say, as I said last episode, it's a vibe. And he really captures the vibe of, I feel like he's kind of like a voice of the generation. He's from a poetic perspective, I say just like a very important figure. And it works visually too. But I mean, you could argue pretty conceptual, although maybe not appreciated as such. A fairly conceptual artist. In a sense, you could say the same thing about Warhol. Warhol's a very conceptual artist, but also, like Haiti Rockette, executes and makes these really cool works. But they are commentaries, to a certain degree, on the culture. Thank you for the wonderful comment, Crash Stop. Great to have you watching. And 3D FYI 123, the Object API show. This is hilarious. Terrifying and hilarious. The Object API shows you bought the RADA on February 8th, 2022. That was my birthday. I bet I did it for my birthday. It is my birthday. I bet I did this for my birthday for 420 Tez, or $1,719. This is an edition of like 100 or 125. And I just couldn't put in an offer. I was like, I think I've put in an offer like once or twice in my entire life. That USD invested in BTC instead of RADA on that day would now be worth roughly $4,180 today, if my math is correct. This is hilarious. The RADA is the piece you have paid the most for so far. Your second most expensive piece, by Die with the Most Likes, called Ground Beef Chris Angel, probably did much better than BTC if you sold it now, a 1 of 1 from 2021. Wow. Just a guess, though. Yeah, probably right. So some of them work out. Aside, I prefer to look only at USD and not Tez because of Tez fluctuates so much over time. The RADA is the most expensive piece by US dollars, but not the one you paid the most Tez for. For example, you paid 420 Tez for the RADA and 888 Tez for gambling in the convenience store. But the latter was much less in US dollars than the RADA. USD is all that matters, I think. Yeah, and I think that is, especially with stable coins maybe being, brought in as official kind of currency, so to speak, increasingly, especially in the United States, one does wonder if we will increasingly, because it is kind of still the dominant, in these currency, and these, if you're in ETH, I mean, here ETH is taking off, and where was it like 2 or 3 months ago, right? So I think there's something to be said for that. I'm trying to think of what the convenience store is. I think that's a Gloom Tube. That's Gloom Tube. Someone we haven't seen for a while, unfortunately. So hopefully Gloom Tube comes back. Thank you for the support last episode. And here is that VFX app, Detroit DU VFX on the App Store. Thank you, everybody, for downloading that. Love to see Poco so happy. Well, I'm even happier because it's Friday right now. And there's the Kurt Hustle Collective. This is hilarious. What a shot. Yes. Brilliant, Kurt Hustle Collective. Great to hear from you, Kanik. Stuart, what a disappointing answer to my question. No magic pill. Referring to how do I learn the history of art faster? No single source of knowledge. A lifetime of living with, appreciating, loving, and experiencing art you love. I got work to do. So, hilarious comment. As I said, the bitter truth. Indeed. And did I think of anything else? No, I think the books. And actually what I was going to say, what I was going to do is actually bring up a couple of great courses. William Clausen, Klossen, has a couple of lectures on the Great Courses Plus. You can get a 30-day subscription for free. Those are excellent. He's excellent. And it just will give you like here's, history, just looking at famous paintings and just inform yourself. I kind of want to return to those. Haiti Rocket, awesome. #1 super show. This means a lot. Massive thanks. So wonderful. Wonderful, wonderful to hear the brilliant artist who made this work here in the comments. Wonderful. Thank you, Haiti Rocket. Pedro Jose, it's time for coffee, Pocobelli, and to think about art. Wonderful. Our little digital coffee that we are having here. Little cakes, here it is. The DU VFX app is super fun. I agree. Was wanting something like this and happy to have found out about it here. Indeed, and it's pretty incredible. I was using it this morning. I was just like, it's, as I always say, if you run out of ideas or if you feel like you hit a wall, try a new software. So there is a software you can try, iLay. This is funny. So I was referring to D-Paint Pocobelli portrait I made featured in episode 236, of course, in D-Paint, and the Champ by Cedar Plank then styled as D. Thibodeau, don't think it was you. Okay, I was just looking on the side there. I thought there is a precedent, but he would have say for sure D-Paint Poco was just made for fun, but the timeline... don't think it was for you, but he would have to say for sure D-Paint Poco was just made for fun for the timeline, but I mentioned it for you. Yeah, thank you, Islay. There was the hair. Ty May came across the D-Paint, by the way, and Waffles did immortalize you with the hair. There's another work, actually. It's called Alley-Oop, where I'm in it, at least according to Waffles from the Spaces. I'm quite proud of that. That was an awesome work that was sent to me by Waffles. After a big auction for this incredible work, I was like ready to throw, that was when I had money. It was a wonderful time where I could just buy all this art. Let's continue. Nathan Sonic. TMI, as they say. Excellent show again, Poco. Dan Control's alignment thing reminds me of Ursus Werley's tidying up art, which really cracked me up at the time. This is pretty funny. Taking art, and this is a pretty digital strategy, isn't it? One imagines, although who knows, but it does seem to have Photoshop kind of involved here. This is pretty funny. So very nice. I've never heard of Ursus Werley, but kind of fun concept art there. I think we could call it. Denirus, thanks for that's the kind of sponsors I want when I grow up. Great to hear from you, Denirus, and totally agree. As I said there, nice one, Kel. Nice one, Pocobelli. Thank you, Kels. Great to hear from you, and DJ Kiro, DUVFX, and here is a video you can check, which I will actually repost right now. So do check that out. Ramina, if I haven't told you before, you have a beautiful voice. You have a very beautiful voice. Well, thank you, Ramina. Thank you. That's a whole subject in itself, actually. When I was a teenager, I was one of those guys where my voice would crack all the time because it actually takes a lot of strength to say my voice. And that's why it's kind of got more of, and I've actually opened up the esophagus too somewhat. So it has more of a kind of like a big baritone, like a baritone. Whereas before I talked more from here, now I kind of talk from here, interestingly. And it's much more effective for me. As you can imagine, if my voice was breaking all over the show, I'm not sure where that would leave me. So I came there the hard way. Thank you. Mina TK, amazing. Your voice is an instrument, interestingly. Like, in a sense, what I'm doing here is singing to a certain degree. There is a lot of overlap. Kurt Hustle Collective, great to hear from you, too. That was awesome. Let's continue. Former UK Prime Minister Liz Truss signs letter criticizing secretive campaign to return Parthenon Marbles to Greece. So for those that don't know, this has been an ongoing dispute between Greece and London and the UK, England, for going on probably over a century, probably since it happened. And what it is if we go here, the Parthenon is in the Acropolis. For those that don't know, this is the Parthenon. This is, probably the most famous structure in Greece. It's in Athens. And over here, can't remember what you call the triangle thing. There is a name for it. Is where these things were on both sides, and they got taken in the mid to late 1800s by Lord Elgin, and they were basically sent to Greece. Now, sent to England. Now, to be fair, there is an argument that could be made that, hey, maybe if they hadn't been moved, they wouldn't have been preserved as well, and all this sort of thing. But here we are now in 2025. And, it's a different story. We don't need to worry about Greece taking care of their Parthenon marbles. And if you go to the Acropolis Museum in Athens, you'll find this area on the top floor, this area where it's like the whole floor is dedicated to the Parthenon marbles, and this is where we're going to put them. And you can even see like these drawings of where they're going to be and everything. And then a commentary about, how angry they are that they still don't have these back. So this has been an issue of dispute, and just finally on this point of contention would be an understatement. And just finally on this, I was one of those people, before I actually went to the British Museum, who were like, well, I understand where Greece is coming from, but maybe they actually preserved them and this sort of thing. But then I went, and this is one of those classic really things between abstraction and having thoughts and reasoning between those thoughts, and actually feeling something and going and sensing, feeling what's happening. And when I got there, I was just kind of like, it was obvious actually at how kind of outrageous this is. Like when you see all of these things there and you're just thinking to yourself the whole time, this banditry, this total banditry. So now I was like, at first I thought Liz Truss was, let's give this back to Greece. No, it's the opposite. And so a bunch of people are mad that they're going to give back their stolen things. And it's quite interesting. And I've talked about this like on the show, like it's been going on for decades. Okay, so I talked about this on the show like literally 100, 200 episodes ago, and I will continue to. So let's just see. So there's this letter from people who are angry that the British Museum and the UK government might send them back. Calls for an end to any negotiation to send back the sculptures, alleging that, quote, this movement to remove them is not organic. It is politically orchestrated, heavily financed, and increasingly shrouded in secrecy. The letter later claims such secrecy may represent a breach of fiduciary duties owed by museum trustees to the public. So they're saying it's immoral. Ironically, they're stealing of Greece's, of the crown jewel, really, of Greece, of classical Greece in Athens. It is the crown jewel. And what's interesting from the British point of view is it's the crown jewel of the British Museum. That museum will not be the same. It's like if you got rid of them, it's like taking the Mona Lisa out of the Louvre. And so it's just a different museum at that point. Right? So So it's not an easy thing for the British, but they really should just do it. Now, it gets interesting. Other signatories of the letter, which claim the marbles are, quote, British-owned and should remain at the museum for the benefit of visitors, derived from the world of politics, academia, the arts, including David Starkey and Michael D. So, according to The Guardian, the letter was published by a group, Great Britain PAC, so basically a nationalist group, which is led by conservative activist Claire. So I don't want to get into the politics of it. And this is the thing. Like, I don't see why this is a right-left issue, although I can understand how it's manifested as such. But really, this is about who owns this stuff and who deserves to own it. The marbles have been housed in the British Museum since 1817, arriving there after being removed from the Parthenon Temple on the Acropolis in Athens by the Scottish nobleman Lord Elgin. They were known as the Elgin Marbles forever. Now they're called the Parthenon Marbles. And the then ambassador to the Ottoman court. In 2022, George Osborne, the chairman of the British Museum, said there is a deal to be done over sharing the Parthenon marbles with Greece. And they should. The thing is, and we could spend all show here on this, and I don't want to. But the thing is, and there is talk about, we have precedents for sharing certain things with museums, but they'll never get them back, I would argue. If you send them to Greece, which I think they should, as some sort of shared thing, but we still own them, like, you're never, ever going to get them back. And the Greeks will say is, come and get them. You want them back? Come and get them. Because they justifiably, in my view, feel like they were completely stolen. So, yeah. So anyway, it continues. All to say, it always pops up in the news every, year or two, at least. This is huge. Kachikazakina Art Dealers Association cancels 2025 edition of New York Fair. The quote, strategic pause comes amid a prolonged contraction in the art market. So, as it says in the email, after careful review, the ADAA Board of Directors has made the decision to not move forward with the 2025 edition of the show. This strategic pause reflects our commitment to advancing the mission, expanding our national impact, and shaping a bold future. But really, probably what it is what we've been seeing in these other articles, actually. Let's see what Kachikazakina says, because it's a weakening market, and the galleries don't want to pay. These things are very expensive, from what I understand. The cancellation is the latest signal that the multi-year contraction in the art market is continuing. In the past 2 weeks, prominent galleries Bloom and Venus Over Manhattan, which we both looked at, have decided to close, and ultra-high-end art advisors Barbara Guggenheim and Abigail Asher are suing each other, alleging fraud and misappropriation of funds. I didn't touch on that one. It's a salacious one, though, if you're looking for some fun art world gossip. But it's a sign of the lack of liquidity, isn't it? So here we just have more evidence, don't we? So yeah, let's just leave it there. More evidence of hard times. Meanwhile, Tezos is booming. The digital art market on Tezos is booming. Hen Collector. Let's continue. Hen Collector. We don't need gimmicks ever. We have art. We have the community. We are inevitable. The financial world needs us, not the other way around. We just have to stay out of our own way, referring to Pocobelli, because I was saying stay out of your own way, ignore their noise, and build our own language and values, and I completely agree. They need us. I really agree. Because you can have all the houses, you can have all the whatevers in the world, but really it's all about meaning. At the end of the day, and we kind of have a really rich repertoire of meaning over here, a genuine new art movement that's intellectually engaged, as we see with Element Lee, totally sophisticated. What do we need? Other than a little bit of money to keep this market going, and luckily there are collectors like Hen Collector, that feed the engine. And what's great is a lot of artists do too. I made that nice sale. I'm just I keep telling myself, don't spend it, but I just can't help myself. It's I see the museum in my mind and I just go, gotta get that. Anyways, Deggy D tagging me here. And okay, so Victor Acevedo, who is one of the very early digital artists, is one of the people who really likes the term non-fungible modernism and believes we should use it to define the space. I believe Pocobelli also sees some parallels with the early modernist movement, just as I do. Time will tell. So Deggy D had written, I think we touched on it. I'm not sure. I'm pretty sure we did, though. The Silent Rise of Non-Fungible Modernism. So, yeah, so in terms of so these are my thoughts. Since I was tagged here, and it is okay, like, let's consider this. I have a couple of concerns. So modernism is such a loaded term. And it's so been drilled into us of what modernism means. I have kind of initial reservations on calling it modernist because it clouds the whole meaning of what is occurring with Picasso, James Joyce, Ezra Pound, T.S. Eliot, and then you go, well, are the pop artists? I consider them more postmodern, but postmodernism is actually something you could argue comes after to a certain degree, but I'd argue if you're screen printing people you see on TV or in magazines, as Warhol is doing with Marilyn and doing it 50 times, you're more in the land of postmodernism than modernism. So all to say, so is pop art modern or postmodern? And I think, I don't know. We could say abstract expressionism is modernism, for sure. With this, what is modernism to a certain degree? We could say, okay, it's the Impressionists, where we start to break away from the academic style and this kind of realism and this flattening of the canvas that we see with Impressionism, right? Where you see the brushstroke is celebrated, which, reaches its logical conclusion with abstract expressionism, right? Where it's completely flat. You have Clement Greenberg. It's about the surface of the canvas and all this. I shouldn't take too long here so that we don't lose what we've built here in this show so far. But all to say, so modernism is too loaded of a term, is what I would say. And non-fungible, non-fungible could be applied to a Picasso painting, as far as I understand, right? Fungible is something like you have a Bitcoin, I have a Bitcoin, and we all consider it fungible. Like we don't need to have the specific Bitcoin that I have or that you have. I can give it to that person, and it means the same thing. Whereas non-fungible is like, this is a unique thing, right? It's non-fungible. If I give a Picasso and you give a Picasso, well, they're going to be different Picassos. These are all uniques, so to speak. And so one could also apply that to paintings 100 years ago, or to all paintings. There's nothing, in a sense, specific about the digital side of it. So it's kind of a crypto term that's been used, and it's also a little crypto. I would argue it's a little too crypto oriented, and so I don't see the mainstream or even the museum people or curators going, "Yeah, we love the term non-fungible." I don't see it catching. I'd also say that for ultra contemporary. I think it's just kind of feels like it's a strained sort of thing. So all to say though, I think it's interesting thinking though. And everybody has it. I have my, I loosely call it the second generation of digital art, right? Work that's people that grew up with video games, made with a graphic user interface. In other words, painting with a computer. So there's a mouse versus the first generation, which had to program everything in. And the third essential characteristic, I'm starting to wonder, is does it often have a digital outcome rather than a physical outcome in mind? Is that another thing? And then, so we get GIFs, right? And there are, as we've seen in the past, ways of making GIFs physical, but it's not the same as seeing the thing animated right in front of you. So all to say, but very interesting discussion. And, again, I think speaks to the sophistication, really, of the discussions that we're having here. So all very interesting. Speaking of sophistication, here's No Hygiene, and thank you, Grace, for tagging me. So placing 0.6 bid on, so No Hygiene selling for how much money is that? Like $2,000? Selling 2 works for $2,000 each. With a Fellowship AI, so fabulous outcome there for No Hygiene. This market is hot. It's not just Tezos, but it's almost like this scene, though, is remarkably hot, is what I would say. Tornado Rodriguez, as a person who is trained in art through university environment, I have always learned that all artists I admire carry a burden of suffering. Mine is using Paint 98, which is hilarious, actually. And here is Tornado Rodriguez. But look at how awesome this is. Duck Hunt. I believe I have this full work later on the show. I believe it's the same work. Love it. Video games, right? Painting with a computer, Object 98 or Paint 98, right? And a digital outcome, for example, right? So interesting. This is pretty hilarious, actually. If you listen to this, we can't listen to it, but words cannot describe how much I hate the Samsung Frame Pro TV. But I just wanted to show...
I have the television.
Like, you just hear it in his voice. It's actually quite entertaining. I didn't listen to the whole thing, but just a brutal review. But what I'm pointing out is this kind of frame around a TV here. I believe they took over...
Wireless Connect box.
I believe they took over... Electric Objects. I believe they took over Electric Objects, who was an early digital frame maker, if I'm not mistaken, Samsung. So this is kind of what happens sometimes in these big corporations. Watch the review if you're curious. Look at this. Speaking of making pixel art physical, welcome to Ruby Springs, Arizona, the UFO town. So it's like made like a real flyer. You gotta love the limited color scheme. Is this Rezo? Is this inkjet? It goes right to the edge. Gorgeous. Gorgeous, use or rendition of this. It looks better in physical, one could argue. I mean, it's pretty cool here. Love this part right here. I don't know if you can see that. Let me just try. Let me tempt the gods here. Like that. I have to say, the part that really stands out is right here. This is fabulous. So I'll just say this kind of story, not sure what it is, story video game continues out of Japan. That is Deadly Yuka, I believe. Here is Zozo. Love the subject of the sunlight coming through the window. Zozo, a brilliant poet here. And just like the digital squares and the whole animation, you almost see how it's built. Geometric Light, Geometric Garden. Edition of 1, sold probably immediately for only 200 Tezos these days to Absur Deity, who raises the price times 11. So that may be a sign to Zozo. Maybe you put auctions. Do what Martin Bruce did. And then you just raise the reserve if necessary. Dull Night. Look at this Juana Pedro. I think my favorite part of this brilliant work of art is the red, the orange in here. Just remember we were talking about complementary colors. Here you have... Now what's the opposite? Is it blue and orange that are complementary? There's violet and yellow. I think it's blue and orange, and I think that's why it just makes the whole thing just pop. This wonderful, I believe, AI artwork. Not sure, doesn't matter. Totally original. Beautiful work of art here. Here's another one. Nighty Night. So this is like, love the frame. So Juana Pedro releasing tons of work. It's all selling out. Look at this one. Kind of looks like a dinosaur, Sagittarius. The Triceratops is probably what I'm thinking of. Although I don't think, anyways, let's not go into my dinosaur knowledge here. Although it's not terrible. Anyways, I do know this is a beautiful work. And look at that, just off violet here. This kind of gray violet and it's just gorgeous and so original. Brilliant. Here is Ed Marola. A carpet merchant finds an intriguing costumer at the center of the world. Interesting. And so here... Look at this, and look at all of the originality. You have to love how this kind of, this clothing here is done. Really just masterful job, and as well here, all the technique that goes into this, carpet of a certain kind, and then even fuzzing things out. Again, we're looking at very sophisticated, art that really started as pixel art. And even here, this is pixels, and then it's just kind of like probably sharpened to the point that it becomes blurry. That's kind of what it looks like, is a sharpening tool that's making that look blurry. Pretty amazing. and making it look like a canvas, interestingly. This is great. Believe the hype. I ended the show with this too, just because I think it's perfect. Beautiful, right? Look at this. Look at everything that is happening here. Believe the hype. It's tempting to think that it is relating to this scene. So it is boom times out here. Look at how gorgeous this is. So this was sold at 25 Tezos each, edition of 10, bringing in like 125, 150 bucks. So nice work for Ed Marola, fabulous piece. Here's Cedar Plank on Rodeo. So this, what a fool believes, and this is, again, telephone GIF. So one assumes this is made on a phone. So nice, kind of, in a sense, simpler work here from Hasdrubal Waffle, also known as Cedar Plank, signing it. Now signing the work. And there you have it, and kind of two faces on top of each other. Cool, interesting phone work from Hasdrubal Waffle. Look at this gorgeous work. Joan of Arc by Scomra, picked up by Deggy D. And this is full size here. Gorgeous. I mean, it almost looks like the picture of a screen here. Look at how rich these textures are. Stable diffusion, different textual inversion, 615 Tezos, $402. So if you're on the sidelines, there's been no better time than to jump in right now. Nov 1914, Vuelo Frontal, and I don't think this was, or offers are coming in at 60 and 70 Tezos. So new work here, new one of one of these big kind of grand canvases here by Nov 1914 with all sorts of challenging tropes, so to speak, here that we've come to know with Nov 1914's challenging style here. So interesting work, keeping the colors consistent, almost like flowers that we've seen before. Here is Kazuhiro Ehira putting out 3 kind of static, I believe, digital paintings, floating structure. And as you see here, this looks like digital painting, doesn't it? And there's even, I remember, see this? See that? That looks like pixelation that's lodged in here. So keeping things very interesting over here. It looks like, and that kind of looks like a multiply, so it's like painting with layers, with digital layers. Very interesting. Look at that. Fabulous. Let's continue. Tender Collapse. So a couple more from Kazuhiro Ehira. And again, kind of looks like Procreate, if I had to venture a guess. And look at that. All these painterly aspects here, right? Just as we were seeing in the cloud with Element Lee, or as we're seeing with Ed Marola, with the sharpening, all this beautiful stuff. What I think is sharpening. Endless Summer. Well, I'm kind of waiting for summer to get started back up here in Berlin, and here we are. Again, looks quite painterly, so it looks like a abstract digital painting by Kazuhiro Ehira. So cool work here. Edition of 1 and none listed yet. Here's Lucy Benson. Never seen Lucy's work before. Brighter Morning. This is interest. Portraits in Antimatter, Digital Mixed Media, and Compressionism. Edition of 1. So unlisted. And quite interesting when you look up close here. As you see, the pixels kind of shine through. So cool combination of kind of what looks like maybe some mark making with a larger kind of brush and then adding kind of a pixelated aspect to it. And again, is the end point here, the end goal of this work seems to be digital, which is kind of interesting. Painting with noise and artifacts. Created by tearing pixels apart and define the in-between substances. So quite a large file here too, edition of 1. Let's continue. Here's Ilya Bliznets playing the artist. So I think we saw earlier versions of this. Interesting kind of outline of a fly there. And here we see all of what goes into an Ilya Bliznet digital painting here. And so this is on Object, uses AI, digital painting and collage, edition of 10. And that looks sold out at 25 Tezos. So nice work there. So here is Yuri J, something related to an artist famous for his dirty studio plan for next week. So a work in progress here from Yuri J, artist in his studio. Big mosaic. It's going to be completely transformed, I'm sure, by the time we see it. And some other works that came out a few days ago from Yuri J, edition of 1. This selling for 550 Tezos or $340. This really cool. I wonder if the Tour de France is starting. So you see, again, all of the painterliness, all of the textures, the wonderful subject matter. And you kind of see what Daggy D is talking about here too. There's a very kind of modernist, when you look at the color, when you look at the texture, when you look at the subject matter, some guys on a bike. I mean, it reminds me of Henri Rousseau's, the football players, for example. Kind of a very modernist composition. To Daggy D's point that we were discussing earlier. Lost in a Desert, right? So here's some more, as you see here. So mosaic filter, signature, and yes, here almost looking like glasses there, not sure. But again, you see this wonderful, digital painting here by Yuri J. Look at the doubling. All of the tropes here, very cool. And here's another one. Thoreau in the forest, throwing his mushrooms away. So interesting titles. I wonder what that's all about. And there you see some very straight digital lines in the radius of the bicycle. Kind of looks like Crocs there, doesn't it? So very cool. Let's continue. Toucan. Heaven's a Corrupted File. Kind of a fun corrupted work here. I guess we could call it kind of glitch. Kind of digital painting, glitch. No tags, so hard to say. And a work in progress, I believe, from Uxine. So cool digital painting, probably Procreate. Love the three skulls on top of each other. Classic work in progress, La Delmas, playing off of La Danza or Matisse's The Dance with some of these jesters, I assume we'd call them. Clowns, jesters, and just wonderfully executed. So glad to see this artist back on the scene. Really nice composition, beautiful digital painting. Speaking of which, the myth, MF Do Myth. What a composition. Speaking of underrated, this artist, the myth, is just, again, like you have to look like a true poet is how I would put it. A true poet. Look at the black. A poet of color, of composition, like a visual poet here. You're looking at this mask, hilarious composition, it all coming together, and even just signature, with the green and the pink, the clouds, just a fabulous composition. And that green, like again, you look at the red and the eyes and those pink, eyelid, and even like the whole thing, a great poet out of Buenos Aires there. Also out of Uruguay, just down the way. Time, also known as Santiago. Gorgeous work here. Just released recently, and here it is. So look at this AI digital painting. I think my favorite part, and there's a lot to like here, is that mustard yellow frame. Like it kind of makes the whole thing. I suppose you could have went to the edge, but I love it way more having not gone to the edge. Gorgeous work here from Santiago. That's on Super Rare, and so here it is at half an ETH, just minted. So Boom Time's out here, my friends. Here is another work just posted by Time, also known as Santiago. So interesting abstract experiments. And here's another one. Taking a sample of a work and then making more work out of it. And look at this blue one. I love it. I love it. I love it. Let's continue. So we saw that. Here is Scamra. Good afternoon. And so here, almost like, looks like a landscape of some kind and some pixelation, AI, probably stable diffusion. Here is Stream by Urin Yacon. So continuing with the streams, these are on Foundation, so on Ethereum, and we'll see if it loads up here. And there it is. So it's getting pretty processed. Pretty processed. Pretty awesome. 0.02 ETH, and so that is on base. And here are some more. So just cool work here. So going multi-chain, which is always a good idea. LB W95 Hourglass. So really cool combination of kind of Windows 95 iconography and video glitch, so to speak, and cool composition here. Cool animation. Outtake from a small series on Zora in 2024. Very cool. And here is Ranix Steer and DJ Kiro. And it is playing this video painting here. So super minimal, looking like it's starting with a Ranix Steer work and then likely put through Kiro's analog video processing. Love the gray, by the way. Nice move, has a nice feel, sold for 35 Tezos. Here's Absurdity posting Seba Sestero on, so just pick this one up. So Seba Sestero, of course, also, I believe out of Buenos Aires, out of Argentina for sure, and a great illustrator, as we saw, with a lot of success in New York Times, government publications on the environment, and more. So just a really cool kind of psychological, surreal illustrator. And you see here, just you know it's Seba Sestero without checking the details or the name. Pamelo Chirone, Delcan, also out of Buenos Aires, I believe, or just outside, out of Argentina. I met Pamelo Chirone, a wonderful artist on Tezos, edition of 1. This is 22 Tezos. Rada has put in a bid, awesomely. Really cool artist on Tezos. Dan Anthony Kelly, Windows Still Life Dog. So very cool, continuing the dog theme and pixel art. This looks kind of what I call raw pixel art. There is no photographing the screen. This is burned. Rural Idol putting in an offer. And here is Byte by Bit Extreme Golf 2000 Hole 5. So very awesome. Not sure if this is a made-up game or if this is actual kind of a landscape of a video game. Interesting theme that we've seen. Here's a couple of brilliant works by Walk. How much does this go for? 45 Tezos. Nice work. Really cool, more sophisticated. As you see here, these are emojis. And I love the titles, because the titles are probably what turn into the emojis on your phone. Or if you're on, like, say, Messenger, you'll get this emoji with probably this writing. Brilliant. So clean, conceptually. 10 Tezos. Sui Soichi. Interesting composition here. Plays with kind of pixel art and illustration, and always kind of has a bit of a kind of a enigmatic kind of vibe to the iconography, for lack of a better term. Interesting composition. Kind of looks like a bird's eye view. Here's Murakit on Zora. Super interesting. Celebrating the JPEG artifacts and then almost taking them a step further, pixelating them. Super interesting work here from Murakit. This is on Zora. And so not sure, volume $14. I don't know why Murakit doesn't mint more on Object. Or frankly, you could even go on Bitcoin. But I would vary it up for some unasked for, unsolicited advice. This is hilarious. The Swans, for those kind of a very dark, cool band, I think they're considered no wave. I think. Lubidel Bliznig, good morning, workers. So there is Elf with a Swans t-shirt in pixel art. I don't know if that's been minted, but would love to know. Wired since 1980. So here's the work by Tornado Rodriguez. Fabulous piece here, playing Duck Hunt, done with Object 98, 2 colors, fabulous. How big is this? 22 kilobytes. Excuse me. 535 by 504. Forever and Ever online, edition of 10. And still available. There are 3 left. Good to know. Scan Session 01, Slava Engel, or Slav 3, I think is actually the name. Interesting piece here. With kind of almost looks like war type imagery, but unclear. There's a radar of some kind. Edition of 12, open edition, actually, for 4 Tezos, still available. Here's Haiti Rocket, edition of 3. So continuing with the Windows 95, probably, iconography, making a little skull, and then letting it go on the algorithm. And offers coming in at 33 and 40 Tezos. Here's Canuck Zapata, Transformations, interesting transformation. Starting almost as a face, almost something kind of Dali-esque about that, the double image. The paranoid critical method, which is worth going into at some point. Almost playing an instrument, very interesting. From Canuck Zapata. Here is Zhu Ziliang, a viewing experience yet to arrive, and let's see if we can get that working. So kind of this is made with Midjourney as we delve into AI here. So Midjourney and I believe some kind of pixelation. Photoshop Final Cut Pro edition of 25 for 8 Tezos, just listed. Renki Nukazawa. Very cool work here from Renki, as usual, playing with the Donald Judd series, right? I imagine, although minted on Open Object, but it looks like the Judds, doesn't it? Stephen Dybus. This is from May. I missed this one, Portal. Very cool work here. Let's see if it plays. Kind of 3D CGI. A very nice piece here. This is 12 Tezos, edition of 15, and not sure. There's maybe one left. There is one left. Here is Sabato, who put out a few of these AI artworks. Cousin bought the new orb, and this is 60 Tezos for a 1 of 1 from Sabato. And playing, I think it's part of the Autogeddon series, Autotopia, as it's called. So we get a 1 of 1 Sabato AI artwork. Peter the Roman. These are brilliant. These sitters. Kind of looks like the Pietà in St. Peter's there. These are fabulous. They are AI, I believe, digital sculptures, so to speak, in the sense that the photos, they don't actually exist. I believe they're photos. This is the work, is what I'm trying to say. There is no sculpture outside of it. But as we've been discussing, and I think actually Peter the Roman commented on it, would love to see these become real. And the technology will get there. These are fabulous. Fabulous work, these sitters. And here, Frenesi, Bosque Gracias. So again, playing with the scanner and probably the typewriter. This hybrid of digital and physical, edition of 5 for 10 Tezos, 1 sold to August Ground. Here's another one, edition of 1 for 60 Tezos, and again, combining scanning and the typewriter. So very cool work there. As we go into the physicals, I'm going to speed up here. Ochi I Shosei, Tamagotchi times Shohei Ochiai, and a wonderful one by Bondozo Bandido, who is, I can't remember the name, I always forget. Hide and Never Seek, great composition here. Totally original work here. On fire as usual, Joachim Official. So this is going to actually open this Wednesday in Berlin at Christian Hjellerdy Gallery. Looking forward to seeing this show. This is going to be awesome. So Joachim Official going to open in Berlin. Bobichik Matthias, Stop Littering. Beautiful piece. This is from 2018. But love the fragmentation and how this artist just, as Ballard says, pursue your own obsessions. Like always pursuing this kind of, using these cars, using this clown face, using the explosion, and then kind of almost, disassembling them, so to speak. This is beautiful from It's Not Gallery, Charlene Tibergine. Super interesting, posted by It's Not Gallery. Another one posted by It's Not Gallery. Sasha Yazov is the artist. Super original artwork here. I assume that's a painting. Very cool. And here's Spoiler Zone. Null das was muss, only what is necessary, or what must happen, I believe. This is by Chun. And cool sculpture, kind of painting sculpture. And a whole series. Or is it a painting? It's more just a sculpture with some textiles in it. Very cool. That's at Spoiler Zone. I believe that's in Berlin. And here's a friend, Maria Nijgenova, who is doing very well, totally just persisted since I've been here in Berlin, really building from nothing and just persistence. So great to see these beautiful works here. 210 by 297, big, has gallery representation. Great story. Here's Walk, who of course I follow, and there is Kurt Cobain. Wonderful. That is your show, my friends. Thank you for joining me. I hope you have a wonderful weekend, and I'll see you on the blockchain. Until then, take care.